So the first thing is I think I just wanted to say how much the Superior Rego's commentary on hope is so relevant. I mean, and you know, I can almost hear him speaking. I don't know if you've heard him speak before, but he speaks with a beautiful combination of precision, what I would call precision from the heart, and those words and reflections, even though they're relatively short on hope, I think they're very meaningful. Mm-hmm. And you know, I think some of his points definitely resonate with my own views on hope. You know, one that we often do replace optimism for hope in a contemporary setting, and perhaps we have done that for years before. And you know, a lot of the modern aspect of hope is in the category of what I would call, you know, my will be done versus God, and we sort of cut God out of the action. And even though that doesn't necessarily completely cut God out of the action, it certainly has an effect on the outcome, and it's certainly not the same thing, I think, as we're talking about as the gift of hope. And I also believe strongly that contemplative thinking and spirituality has a lot to do with hope as well. At least hope in the relationship of hope as God's gift to us, and that it's really needed, but it can't be brought on by any type of human effort alone. You know, rather, like if we try and think about hope as being separated, like we might try and separate a magnetic field by putting a piece of paper between the magnetic field and the object, we can't see it, but it's still there, and its action is there. So we can't will things into motion just because we have hope directly. And I think at the end of the day, for us to really recognize and fully benefit from hope, we have to recognize that really requires a position of surrender in our disposition with God, you know. And we often tend to approach God with an armful of needs and requirements and agendas, and put those into the category of, you know, our hopeful bucket, which is, you know, more or less just treating God like a prayer machine. And you know, and the other side of that, of course, is we say, well, we don't do anything. We sit there like an inert sponge and wait for something to happen. Or we've been given gifts and we're supposed to take action when appropriate. So it isn't a matter of just giving up and you know, waiting on the couch for something to happen either. So I think that's another factor. And so I think of hope as you know, a sort of confident expectation of God's action in the world, and that's in our world and the world that surrounds us. So, and that we can be confident of that. And you know, it happens, I think, at least in a better way, if we don't try and over direct it look for the outcomes that we're looking for. And when we do, we're less likely to have a satisfactory outcome, I think. So it's interesting also to me that the Hebrew word for hope has two meanings. One is expectations, and the other is like a cord or a rope. And I often think about hope as a sort of invisible pipe full of grace that you can't see, but it's there, and it's always there with you, and you're going to do better if you let it work. Yeah. You know, do what you're supposed to do, but don't run, you know, too much interference on the game, because you're not the only player on the field. You know what I mean? Actually, yeah. You're not the big player that's on the field. So so those were just a few sort of musings that I had, specifically related to the Superior General's comments. But you know, I think hope is a very sort of misunderstood, both from a theological and a spiritual perspective, by many of us in the same way as you know, the word has been sort of co-opted, you know, with a very different sort of secular meaning today.
I agree. It's you know, people we're just, I think as humans, we want to be in control of everything. And, so that's whenever I hear somebody say, hope and prayers, or, it's hard because I think, well, it isn't, like you said, it's not a passive activity, but it's also not a controlling one. And I think it's when you don't think about it a lot, but you see it in people's behaviors, where you see that people are hoping, but they're controlling, or they're hoping and they don't have to do anything. So I'd like exactly what you said. It's the invisible pipe full of grace. That's awesome. So, what is your hope for the church and for the Catholic faith?
Well, there's a really big question. I mean, I think in a way, my hope would be that we try and return as individuals to do what we're supposed to be doing as Christians. That really is just simply to love God and each other. And of course, today we are focused on, with so much polarization and what Richard Rohr would describe as dualistic thinking, in the world, that we've almost created a set of tribes, or a church within a church, or maybe even churches within a church. And my hope is that we start to go back to basics here, return to our personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and then all of these other things that the tribalism and dualistic thinking and division that is rampant, not just in the church but in society in general, will start to dissolve, because the more that you involve God in the decision-making process, the better your decisions will be, and they'll be more aligned with Him, just as a factor of that, rather than us just throwing rocks at each other. And this isn't necessarily a new thing. I mean, there's been divisions in the church right from the very early days. So I'm not trying to say, it's just, I think that we've got, at least in the United States, the amplitude is such now that people just go straight to an opinion. So the idea of information gathering, research, analysis, conclusion related to facts as they exist, as we know them, in pursuit and search of the truth. A lot of that is not happening in many areas of society, and the church has always survived the ups and downs of various different changes and the like. So my hope would be, just God's influence will persevere in the long run, and that we go back to basics, loving God and loving each other. And as to quote a Franciscan, if I'm permitted to do so, John Duns Scotus says, if it isn't of love, it's not of God. And if we just were thinking a little bit more about that in our decision-making processes before we jump to judgment, everything would change, and everything would change very, very quickly.
I am constantly amazed at people that are supposed to be Christian, that when they disagree, there's so much hate speech. It's so disheartening. And that's what I think, that it's natural to be frustrated. We don't all think alike. We're not, all the same, but man, that's not ever how Jesus talked to anybody, even when he was knocking over the table in the temple,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think if you look at the world and you look at scripture, just actually, well, stick to scripture where Jesus is speaking, where God is speaking, being judgmental is not in the picture. God is always on the side of his people, and always on the side of love. So, how can we continuously get onto the other side of this? Well, we're human, obviously, but we can't make that the church. That is not the church. it isn't the church, and it's not the church that we're called into, or baptized into. It's not.
Exactly. Sorry, I had the chorus. My husband just got home and the dog sees him out the windows, greeting him excitedly.
They're just expressing their love, Mary Kay.
Yes, loudly. And he's waiting now. He's perched at the end of the bed. Go ahead, go find him. Yeah, go find him. Yeah, we have the announcement barking. I always know when it's somebody that belongs in the family, the bark is very different.
I always feel like if I can't use God as an example of unconditional love, a dog is the second, which ironically is God spelled backwards.
Exactly. Well, I'm hoping that the church, I get worried about it, but then like you said, this is not something that just happened, and things are cyclical and everything kind of comes around. So that's what my prayer is always, that, we'll find God and kind of get back on track. I think we can do it. God can whip us into shape.
Yeah, and I think that, to that point, I'm a product, or my life is a product of journeying through Vatican II. And I think that, by the time historians are looking back at this change in the church 100 years from now, Vatican II will make the Reformation look like a garden party. Because there's so much change happened in the church. It's just been happening at a very rapid rate of knots compared to previous situations, and it will be stronger as a result, even if it ends up being smaller to begin with, because I think we have a church that's growing in terms of its desire. The people's focus on spirituality, their holy longing, is now based on desire. They're not being catechized by obligation. They are there by choice, which might mean there's fewer of us, but they'll be it will be strong in the long run, because you can't force God on a person.
And that's a very hopeful way to look at it. I agree. It isn't routine anymore. I think people are finding ways to connect, and in different ways. And so hopefully that's what will continue to happen. So how is your hope? Do you feel that your sense of hope is nurtured by God? Are there different activities that you do, different reading? How does God help you be hopeful?
Well, I think to lean into the last 18 months or so, the COVID-19 experience. I think for me, I could not have assumed or even imagined in my wildest dreams some of the love and generosity that's been presented by people during this crisis. We've brought out both the best and the worst, if you like, in people, but it also gives us the assurance that no matter what, God's hand is on the tiller, by virtue of all those in the world that are doing his work. So here at Mater Della Rosa, we were previously, and are still, known for our retreat work. That's been the primary thing that we've been doing. But when COVID struck, for some reason, we managed to reach out into the food category, food ministry category, and within a very short period of time, a bunch of people appeared with the necessary support and money and resources for us to be able to feed the homeless and the vulnerable in our area during the course of this crisis, in a way that I couldn't ever have possibly imagined. And I think it is a way that if you I hate to use the bumper sticker of let go, let God, let God let go, but it's sort of true. I mean, it's and I think things just occur as a result of that. Similarly, in our own ministry, you know, we hadn't been doing much from the online perspective. Claire can relate to that. And we basically, the only way that we've been able to communicate with people on a regular basis with this has been doing, you know, online outreach-based ministry. So in a way, despite all of the badness, and there's plenty of it that is in the COVID situation, a lot of sadness and tragedy, there's also been, you know, a lot of heroic acts. And I think, you know, in a way, we, at least locally here, have been moved to be more apostolic rather than monastic in our ministerial approach. And, you know, that's just remarkable, because, you know, if that was based on a human planning action, we'd probably be talking about this in 5 years' time instead of actually doing something. So, so it's been. So I you know, I see the. I see the positive aspects of the way that people have responded, and the generosity that people have given, both of their time and their resources to help others, which is it's just wonderful.
It really, you know, that was my thought, is all along, as frustrating as it was and as scary as it's been, is just that we have to learn how to do things different. And I felt like when we come out of this, that we're going to have skills that we didn't have, you know, before.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great positive. I'm hoping it will, you know, that COVID will help education reform to happen, because maybe people see how important it is. You know, people that didn't pay much attention till they had to homeschool their kids because they couldn't go to school, and, you know, just all kinds of different things. And then the medical, you know, being able to maybe have access to televisits and reaching out to counsel people that have mental health crisis or drug issues, you know, to be able to do
Right.
all that. You know, that's my thing, is that if we look, you know, we can find the goodness in there mixed in with the scariness.
Yeah, and I think also the movement towards, at least I've seen this in many organizations, and particularly church related organizations. Even though we may not have been planning it, we've moved a good distance along into the category of servant leadership as a model here, as a part of it. So, you know, even today, just before this meeting, you know, we're serving lunch to a bunch of retreatants people meeting in here, and they don't know that the people behind the counter are our director of finance, our director of facilities, our guest services individuals, all, you know, there serving, because we're short of people in the kitchen at the moment. And, you know, there's no need to ask these people to do this, and that to me is a really beautiful thing. It really is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, just the idea of everybody kind of wanting to help. And I think we do see that a lot, even if help is defined by different people in different ways. But I think it is it's a positive. It's a positive. So how would you say that hope moves you in your everyday life?
You know, I think that for me, just continuously trying to remind myself of God's work in others, you know, that does continue to surprise me. And I think a little bit like prayer, you know, a lot of people, and I certainly used to be that way. We've sort of compartmentalized our prayer life, where, you know, this time's allocated for this, and this time's allocated for something else. I think we can do the same thing with hope if we're not attentive to it, and if we just are aware of what others are doing. When someone says a kind word, or defends someone, or helps someone who's you know, then you're sort of seeing that God's work in others just manifest. And the more that you the more that you notice it, more that you're aware of it, it seems like there's more of it
Yeah.
one way or another. And what's so beautiful about that is there's really not much you can do about it. You know, when someone wants to to respond in a particular way, it just happens, and it's it's like spontaneous grace. So for me, that reinforces hope continuously, versus the other bad stuff that does happen around you, and even the bad stuff that's happening around you, you start to be a bit more reflective about that. Thinking, well, maybe this person isn't the devil incarnate. Maybe they're just sick or having a bad hair day or whatever
Right.
it is
Right.
that's going on in their lives. And then that moderates your own response to that situation as well.
I agree. That was something, my dad was a social worker. So growing up, that was always sort of part of any kind of discussion when, you would say as a kid that somebody was really mean, or that, it was always, well, you don't know what's going on with them. And so I know I find myself thinking a lot about why somebody would do something that they've done that seems, you know, cruel or mean or whatever. And it's sometimes it's a challenge, but it does help a lot, I think, in
Yeah.
approaching people. It's like a change in your mindset. So I agree with you completely. If you're always looking for the good, you tend to find it.
Yeah, and I think I used to do a lot of prison ministry before I moved to California, and when you really start listening to people's stories there, and you realize that joining a gang for some people is an upgrade from their family life because their parents were prostituting them.
Yeah.
They were 8 and 9 and 10 years old. You have a very different perspective on how they ended up where they are, and
Yeah. And that it's like a cyclical thing too, things go back. Somebody does something terrible because that's what they experienced, and they experienced that from another person who and it's
yeah.
like you break the cycle, you know.
Unfortunately, you're so right, Mary Kay. I wish there was, well, there are ways of breaking that cycle, and there are people like Greg Boyle, in here in the Los Angeles area, that has changed thousands of lives as a result of
Yeah.
not throwing people on the trash heap, as sometimes we have a tendency to do.
Yeah. And it's challenging. And then part of it, I think the challenge is not even just the people that are creating the problems, or that, are struggling. It's getting people that aren't struggling to be empathetic, to
Yes.
understand and to want to help, instead of to immediately write somebody off. Well, that person is, it's easy to do because people do such cruel things, but there's usually a reason for it. I think, at least I find, it seems that there's very few instances where a person is truly evil.
Yes.
Most cases it is something that has shaped them that way. And
Yeah. It's true, and coming from an Irish background, sometimes I believe the devil gets a bad rap too. Where he gets blamed for everything, where in
yeah,
fact we still have free will, and you can do bad things perfectly well on your own.
exactly,
But,
exactly. You don't need any help. And
no.
it starts out small, I think the basic thing is, if you're just thinking about yourself, if your whole life you're just thinking about yourself, the potential for really bad behavior is,
Yes, I think we've seen a lot of examples of that in recent years. So
yes, yes, we have. But then there's all the people that do the really good things. Like that
yeah,
was the nice thing yesterday about going to the Solanus Casey Center is,
yes,
here's this guy who's just a good, humble Irishman,
yeah,
and and he accepts when they tell him, oh, you're not smart enough. You
yeah,
can't, you
yeah,
can't give a homily,
yeah,
you can answer the door.
right.
Well, no, we'll ordain you, but you can't hear confessions, and you can't give a homily, but you can answer the door. And what did he do with it? All those people that came to see him. And so that
Yeah.
keeps going.
It's amazing how many of the people that the church has put into the lowest and in quotes dumbest positions have ended up being the icons for all of us.
Yeah. I mean, that it isn't it's not the hierarchy, it's the people that are working, which is always that's how I feel about my connection with the Catholic Church.
Yes.
Although I do have to say that I very much connect with Pope Francis and his call, and but it's the people that are working, growing up, all of the priests and the brothers and the sisters that we knew in our family, and then just the people working in the church. So
it's true.
Yeah, that's and it's easier to follow them too. I think that's so powerful, because if you think of the saints, that came way before us, like Saint Francis of Assisi, who's awesome. But still, it's like they're saints, and the halo's there, and you think, well, I can't do that. Yeah. But then you think about just listening to people when they talk to you, like Solanus Casey did, and I think, okay, maybe I can do that. Unless they get on my nerves.
You always have to have that caveat, right?
You do. There's a limit. There's a limit. It's the Irish. I've got Irish as well in me.
Okay.
I can
commiserate with that.
Yeah. It's a blend. In fact, it's a strong blend between Irish and French.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's a fiery combo.
Yeah. We've got a bit of Joan of Arc in you as well, then.
Yeah, exactly. So how has hope carried you through personal trials? And did you kind of feel it guiding you when you were going through things? And you don't have to be super, specific, but.
Yeah. I think the way I would think about hope, particularly during some of the darkest times, is rather like a sanctuary lamp in a darkened church. That it was there, lit up in my soul, even though it wasn't very recognizable at the time, and I felt like I was really left in the darkness. But it, after a while, became obvious that it was the only light left on in the building. So that reassurance of God's presence, I think, even if I didn't necessarily like what I was being dealt with at the time, and probably for me, one of those times would have been the loss of my first born son, who was one of twins, and that was definitely a point where I had the big prayer thing going on for his survival, both of the twins' survival, and then one of the twins survived, and the eldest one didn't. That was a time of sort of both joy and disappointment, but it was also something that hope brought me through that situation, to understand that the gift was the son that had survived, and also the gift was the son who was there, eternally, and will be with us always. So, but it sometimes takes you a while to come to those realizations when you're just mourning the loss of someone, and whether it's someone who's been alive for one day or for 70 years. The only difference is the memories you have of them, but the loss isn't really any different, which people that haven't lost a child don't really understand that difference there. But I like the idea of the sanctuary lamp in your soul, because it was always there. And in a way, I think, even at times you might feel like, well, give me a stone, I'm going to put that lamp out, put that light out. But of course, it's not easy to extinguish, because you can't extinguish from God from your life. You can ignore God, but you can't extinguish God's presence because he's in us always. So
Yeah. Yes, it's definitely, I love, that's a beautiful, I love that, the sanctuary lamp, because that's how it feels, when you're struggling with something in your life, and it feels like you're in darkness, and then there's just that light. And I think that's the blessing of faith too, in addition to hope, is that if it's been nurtured in your life, you kind of feel like you're carried along when you feel like you can't go yourself.
right.
And you know, I never ever, when things happen with me, I never felt angry with God. I
Yeah,
just kept kind of calling out to him, to help me.
yeah,
And he always did. It
yeah.
just, it's not an instant, and it doesn't mean that all the pain goes away. I think people get confused about that sometimes. I think they feel like that God's supposed to wave a wand and remove all the pain,
Yeah.
but it doesn't work like that. And we can't grow without those painful moments.
No, I mean, I think it's whether it's something, like a major life event that occurs, or whether it's just, as St. John of the Cross might say, a dark night of the soul. Anytime you have one of those things, what happens? Well, you end up having to explore. You end up having to go out into the divine darkness, really into the woods,
Mhm.
to see, where is God and where am I in my relationship with God. And very few of those times will you find yourself turning into an atheist. You'll
Yeah.
find you're going to be enriched by it. But a lot of people don't want to go there. I mean, I think that's another thing that's sort of weird, about where we are with some of these things, that we're either looking for a psychological improvement in our disposition by controlling the metabolics of our behavior, or we find some artificial way of stimulating ourselves to get that, to look for that peace. But the only place that the peace is really there, the everlasting peace, the unshakable peace, is in your relationship with God, which, regardless of which faith you're coming at this from. And so the contemplative way, I think, is still the hope is very tightly tied up in this, because you can't really have theological hope as defined by the Superior General at the beginning of this interview, without being in a position of surrender
And that's scary for people. It's like, like taking a leap off a cliff, I suppose,
yeah,
that you have to be able to just let everything go. And, that's, to me, I think that's where the blessing lies, when you go through something
yeah,
difficult in your life, because you don't have a choice at that point, I think, and
yeah,
you just sort of let go. And then it's like an eye-opening thing. And you're like, oh, and then you can kind of redirect. At least that was my experience. So,
yeah.
that now I'm a lot easier. It's a lot easier for me to say, oh, I'm not worried. Uh, I know that things will happen, and I'll be guided. So,
Yeah, that patience is sometimes a difficult thing to have. But I think there's a difference between impatience um, and patience, in the sense that a lot of people view that being in control is more important than results, and we see that all the time. And if
yeah,
you let things play out, not without, not to the level of stupidity, of course, but
right.
uh, um, but letting them come out in what my mum used to call God's time,
Yeah.
which of course Irish never, I definitely didn't want to wait for anything. So
you
uh,
know, I'll just do it
but
myself.
but it's like the old adage, isn't it? When I was 18, I was amazed how stupid my parents were, but by the time I
Yeah,
was 21, I was surprised how much they'd learned in such a short period of time.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then you see it, you know, with you see the flip around when you have your kids, and you're like, oh, like I tell my son, so he'll be frustrated with something, and I'm like, it's all right, you're an idiot right now. Everyone's an idiot. You too. So
well, trust me, Mary Kay, you're not of that age yet, but when you get to my age and you're a grandparent, your revenge will come.
Yes, I haven't got to that point with him. I do my stepkids. I actually am a grandmother, and
okay.
it is, yeah, but yeah, I know I know what you mean.
Revenge is very sweet, I can tell you. I could, when I have my grandchildren here, I can teach them something that will drive their parents nuts for at least a year. So that's
exactly. Oh yes, the bliss.
yes.
So what do you do to nurture hope in your life, Michael? How do you keep it strong?
I think it is part of just trying to remind myself of his continuous presence and action in all things, and that, you know, there is in hope also a call to action. You know, people use the phrase that we're his eyes and ears and hands and feet, and that's true to a certain extent. So if we can do something, we should do it. And you know, you can't really, particularly being Irish, you can't really, you know, not get engaged with things. I find difficulty doing that, but you just want to try and do it in the right type of way. And you know, when I was younger, I was always surprised about how if you got involved with something, and let's say you're at school and someone was being bullied, or something was going wrong, someone was picking on someone, and no one was standing up for that person or defending them in some way, shape, or form. And if you once you ran interference on that, once you stood up for that person, once you called out for something that was just and right, or as just and right as a teenager can do, then you know, it was amazing how many people also stood up next to you as a part of it. So sometimes it is literally just taking that, you know, step to you know, get out of the boat and have some confidence that doing the right thing is the right thing, regardless of what the repercussions might be for yourself. And we walk a fine line as Christians about trying to belong to, you know, an individual group, or be identified as an individual group or clique or whatever, and at the same time doing the right thing. So I think we have to nurture, you know, I won't call it thinking out of the box, but just stepping out of your comfort zone when necessary. And you know, that's obviously has some risks associated with it, and it doesn't suit everyone, but we can do a lot of damage as Christians by remaining silent.
Yeah.
And being present and being silent witnesses to bad stuff going on is, you know, you're an observer at the stoning, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that continuous the awareness of the continuous presence, it's not like being judgmental, it's just sort of more of a call to action. And I think that comes out of alignment with God. You know, it's not that you're losing your will, but it is that you're being more aligned with God's will. And I think if you see this if you going back to the saints you were mentioning a few minutes ago, this is why they're not scared. They were never scared of getting martyred, because that was just like a fast track to the other side. There was never a question. It was people willing to give up their lives just by saying a few words of, I deny God or persecute someone else or whatever, and they don't do it. I mean, people don't give up their lives for things that aren't meaningful. And those little crucifixions happen every day, and you have the opportunity to to avoid them, to do what the crucifixion has told us to do, to not let this happen at a smaller level, in our lives. So I think that keeps hope more alive for me, because I know that there's a continuous stream of presence of God's grace, somewhere in the room, even if I'm not feeling it,
Yeah.
and all I have to do is get out my hope detector, and he'll do the rest. It's not as simple as that, of course,
Uh-oh.
but
But that's true. Yeah, and I always find that for me, those are the moments where I have to like be quiet, and that's
yeah.
hard. To get quiet enough to be able to sense, okay, that's a challenge.
Yes, I think silent prayer, contemplative prayer. We've got a veritable supermarket in the Catholic Church to choose from, but unfortunately, we stopped using most of it since about the 15th century. But it's all there, and can be used, and it will also increase our awareness of God's presence, in our everyday life, as well as a part of that. So.
Definitely.
So.
So who do you find inspires you to hope that we can create and live in a better world? Is there like a particular person, either, a big saint or a little saint?
Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of a lot of the mystics of old, and the modern ones, right up to Thomas Merton, and even the recently passed ones that did most of the revitalization of contemplative prayer in recent years. Bill Menninger and Tom Keating and that crew. But in reality, for my everyday life, it's the Christful people that I work with. Like you were saying earlier about the people around you from a family perspective. Here, I'm working in a retreat center. The place is always littered with priests and nuns and brothers, and we have several that live on the premises. The teenagers that are coming here, every week on retreat, and the men and the women and married couples that come here at the weekends. All of those people, they inspire me to a better life. Probably the one person, if I picked on one person, it would have to probably be my wife, who is the most selfless person that I know, known in my life. She reminds me that I am still things of the world on occasion, and helps me see how fruitless that is by not requesting much herself, which is extremely irritating, because I could never satisfy my own desire for something, because she never wants anything else herself, which after 41 years is tough to deal with. But no, there's so many wonderful people around. We're very blessed. Of course, I'm working in a ministry as well here, so I'm surrounded by a lot of people that are in that ministry, and it's just awesome to be with them on a daily basis. So
It is. It really. I just recently was hired full time with Faith. I've been working with them part time, and so
okay.
we do magazines like for 70 different Catholic organizations and dioceses across the country.
Okay.
So, and it really is wonderful to work with people where you can talk about, something that strikes you, or to be prayerful, or, it really is a huge uplifting thing. And then, to be able to talk to different people about their faith in different aspects from when I get to do interviews and writing, it really is wonderful. It's a blessing. So I completely understand where you're coming from. So how do you see that the Passionist community inspires hope in each other and in the world, would you say?
Well, in each other and those around them, I think we do that. Or the Passionists do that by being invitational, compassionate, empathetic, and in one important way, being less judgmentals of others in the world. Even when I think there's good case for it.
You know?
They're not all of them are will jump run to jump to judgment, and that's a refreshing characteristic in the world today. But the Passionists are very much they'll provide hope, because there seems to be that recognition of the pipeline of grace that is there, that allows people to be hospitable, invitational, empathetic, compassionate, listening to people's problems, and they have a very unforced energy, spiritual energy about them, which is unlike a lot of other orders, in my opinion. Because most of the other orders, including the Franciscans, of which I'm a member of, have their bumper sticker. The Jesuits seeing God in all things, and the Benedictines of work and prayer, and the Franciscans of gospel to life and life to gospel. And the Passionists, if they've got if they've got anything at all, it is, may the passion of Jesus Christ remain always in your heart. So it is feeling God in your heart. That's a lot of what being a Passionist is, and this is why so many people are attracted to the charism, I think, and it is something that inspires you from a hope perspective.
There might be a delivery truck driving by. I'm just gonna.
That's okay.
Nope, it appears to be
It
our.
happens. That's how most of us get our goods these days, right? So
That's right.
stop
And
going
they
to
come through the
stores.
neighborhood and it's just terrible. They just whip dogs into frenzy. Awful. So where do you see the power of hope at work in the world today, Michael? Any place in particular? We kind of talked about that earlier. You were mentioning the pandemic, and
I think that a couple of angles. I think you can see it in the good response to the COVID-19 pandemic and all of the fallout that's occurred with that. Regardless of the faith or religion, there, people feeding the hungry, dealing with the homeless, of course, the healthcare crisis that's emerged from all of that, and a lot of good sharing. I also think that at a spiritual level, that there's a growing number of people that are focusing on the quality of their spiritual lives rather than the accumulation of wealth or fame or whatever you want to call it as sort of an end goal. So we seem to be in a different place than we were in the 80s and the early 90s, just chasing the rainbow with goods at this point. And I do think if you look at what people are looking for from a workplace perspective, people are looking for different things than just money than they were a few years ago. Money is still important because you have to support your family, but work-life balance, having a culture that's not toxic, that you're working in, having a boss that's not a difficult person to deal with. I'll just say that. Having someone that you can respect, if not love, it's people are looking for those types of things. I think in their lives, they're looking for that type of balance that may or may not draw them directly to a particular faith genre or group, as is seen by the growth in the nons and the SPNRs in the world, in the US at least. That's like the largest religious, or if you want to call it religious, or group is the largest group now, more than 25%. But what it also tells me is that most of those people are looking for spiritual nourishment. So that is a great opportunity, and that hope is, I think, driven by the holy longing that's embedded in us all. And they're on a path to find God in whatever circuitous means are going to be open. But it's an opportunity, I think, for the church. Unfortunately, we're not very good at evangelizing. We're sort of we only play one type of music. So if you don't like classical music, that you're not going to hear another tune out of most of our churches. And I think that's where the opportunity is. We've got to see that hope that's out there in the world, where this spiritual longing is stronger than it ever has been since they started measuring this type of thing, and go from there. My doctorate, for example, was focused. My project and my treatise was focused on using poetry and photography as a spiritual practice, and using that and combination of Lectio Divina and Visio Divina. It's not difficult to prove how people's spirituality is deepened by what they see and what they hear, and how they hear it and reflecting on it. This is not rocket science, but it's so I think there's a bristling body of spiritual hunger out there that needs more satisfaction than being dealt with, being satisfied by pharmaceuticals or going to the spa and sticking rocks on your back at the weekend, even though there's nothing wrong with going to the spa and sticking rocks on your back.
No. If someone else is paying for it, I'm up for it. It is, because you see that. I keep thinking that the parish that I belong to is in Toledo, Ohio, and we're right in the projects. We're surrounded by the projects. Okay. And I know that we don't have a lot of young adults that are coming, but I know that the way to get them there and to get them engaged is because so many of them want to help or want to do something.
Yes.
And if we could just figure out a way of doing that, and if we had enough money for a youth minister that could reach out to young Catholics, that would be huge, because I think that's where it would start. And then, once they did the helping part and we got them in, and then they experienced the Mass and the sacraments, I think it would be very powerful, but I haven't figured out how to do that yet.
I agree. I mean, I think I've shared this with Claire in the past, but I have this sort of baseball analogy of faith development as it relates to the Catholic Church. And I feel that we start on third base, where we have basically the sacraments and our catechesis, and that's basically it. But first base is recognizing that God exists in the world, and second base is having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Third base makes all the sense when you've been through the first two. But exactly. if you're not doing anything to evangelize at the first or second base, yep, which basically I think we're uncomfortable at doing, and we're not equipped to do it. And your example of the young adults and the teens is perfect. My wife is a teen minister, and I've done a lot of work with teens. And if service, they can, whether they're wrapping Christmas presents or distributing food or turkeys or whatever, they know they're doing something practical. And it's not just to, for a lot of them at least, it's not just for getting it on the resume where they've got some forced service that has to be on their resume for college or whatever. It's because there's a joy in that, and they can't necessarily quantify it, but they know they want to do it. And guess what? They're doing God's work in a practical way, and that's why I think we have to expand, even in our own confines, the concept of prayer, because I don't think giving someone who needs a sandwich is any less of a prayer than going into the chapel and spending 30 minutes with Jesus in private prayer. I mean, it's a different experience, but it's to the other guy. Where does it say in Scripture somewhere? Feed me when I'm hungry. Visit me when I'm imprisoned. I mean, I think it's in there somewhere. So we got to start just meeting people where they are, which Pope Francis, keeps saying that in droves, but I'm not sure people really know what that means. And because we don't want to go where people are in some cases.
Yeah, it's messy. It's weird. Yeah. But it's true. That was one of the things our church started doing streaming just when COVID hit. And my son in high school studied audio and visual technology. And so I asked him, would you be willing to run the camera that we have at Mass on Sundays? And so he agreed to do it. And then, now he's slowly coming back and feeling connected. He has a purpose at Mass. Yes. So it's, and I sense a great difference in him when he talks about his spirituality. And my stepson is in the Navy, and I sense, I'm starting to send him things, and I think he's thinking more, as you get older, you start seeing more in your life. And so, it is, like you said, there's many different kinds of prayers we need to be praying. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share about hope, or anything, Michael, that we haven't talked about? Because we've answered all the questions. All the questions have been answered.
Right. No, I think I think we've pretty well covered the gamut from my side. It is interesting to see how hope is a misunderstood gift of God, and I think, like everything else, if you go and explore just a little way into the mystery of these things, it doesn't take long for the light bulb to go on. But it has to be an interior thing rather than an exterior thing, and that's why there's great promise, I think, in the fact that people are out there searching for deepening faith, and for those that have sort of stopped searching, they're just sort of in a elongated dark night of the soul, and they still need something as well. So, trying to find ways to reach out to people. Service is a perfect example. You don't have to. You don't need any theological chops to go and help deliver some food, or help someone, with their groceries, or do any of these other things. But you're helping another fellow human, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you're not thinking about yourself, which seems to be the key, in moving forward in your spiritual life, is to not be focused on yourself all the time.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that the in some cases, and probably in all cases, the motive or the intention is almost more important than the act, because we have plenty of people that are giving away billions of dollars, but guess what? They're getting free publicity for their XYZ foundation. And their name will live on eternally as a result of that. Whereas the real givers are the people that are doing it anonymously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that it's not you don't need to be recognized. You're just doing it because it needs to be done.
Yeah.
It is, it's nice talking to everybody, because I think that it does. There's many of us that are looking, and we're seeing things, and we're trying to guide. And it's always, I think, probably in your work, you see it with people that are coming in for the retreats and making connections that maybe they didn't have the opportunity to make until they came to the retreat house. So that's good. We'll get that hope out there. So
let's remain hopeful.
Exactly. And keep working.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, not just sitting around.